Hi, this is Ingrid from Quilt Essential Co. in St. Albert, and today we'll be talking about the Goddess tool. And this is the ruler that we'll be using. It's designed by Tiffany Hayes, and it's a really cool ruler, and there's lots of different things you can do with it, and we'll be using it with our block of the month this year. So I'm going to be giving you some quick tips on how to use the ruler, as there are no instructions that come with it. So let's get sewing. So here's just an overview of the pieces that are involved. So with the Goddess tool, all of these pieces can be cut out to make the blocks. So there's half square triangles, so that's used on this end of the ruler. And there's tall triangles, that's used with this part of the ruler. And then there's cutaways. Cutaways are kind of fun. This was a half square triangle, and then we cut this away and added a half square triangle. So there's cutaways for small, medium, and large. This was a square and we added cutaways. So combination of all these different things makes some incredibly fun blocks. So now we're going to go and see how they're all put together bit by bit. We're going to be using the Goddess tool, and I've made you a tip sheet so that you can follow along. Now, I have sprayed the back of this with Grippy spray, which I really love, so that it doesn't slip. If you can't have that mailed to you or you don't have that, you can also use the grips that you can buy for rulers, and I prefer the silicone-y ones because then they get stuck on the back and you can still move the ruler, and then when you push down, it stays put. So we're going to start by doing half square triangles. And I did design a tip sheet. Everyone in my block of the month gets these sheets, and it tells you how we're working. But if you would like to follow along and get the PDF off our website, you can do that also if you're not in block of the month. So first thing I'm going to do is half square triangles, and I'm just giving these a press. I love my wool mat. I use my little iron, and I want to make sure that 2 of these are stacked together right sides up. So whatever the pattern calls for, you're going to be doing them 2 right sides up. We want to trim on the side to make sure it's nice and even, and I like to do that with 2 rulers. So I'm just putting 1 ruler that's straight across the top over here, and I'm exaggerating this a little bit. And then when I bop up another ruler to that and move that out of the way, then I can trim that off. So I don't have to move my strip. Now I cut off quite a chunk here just to show you, but you could just bop that over there like this and put your second ruler over here and just cut off a tiny little piece like this. If you are right-handed, you'll be working this way. If you're left-handed, you'll be working on the other side of your strip. So it works out really, really well. So now we've got it straightened up, and we are going to be using our Goddess tool with the half square triangle part. So this one happens to be a 4.5 inch strip. So I've lined up my 4.5 inch strip dot line with this, lined it up over here, and I am just going to cut straight up here. And you'll see that it's nice here, and I have a blunt end. I want a blunt end down here too. So if I push this up and put my 5 inch strip on here, that effectively gives me a straight diagonal here, straight on the bottom, and I can just trim off the bottom of that, and I get a blunt end also. Then turn your ruler, line up your 4.5 inch on the bottom. So here's your 4.5, here's your diagonal, and cut. Again, you want that blunt end, so you're just going to move that over, put your 5 inch dot line here, make sure that this is nice and level with your diagonal, and you're just going to cut off the little point here also. Now you're just going to sew those. So they're already stacked together, sew down here. This is one I've already sewn. And when you sew it from blunt to blunt with a 1/4 inch, and then you take it and press it, it is perfect, and you have no dog ears. So here's one that's completely finished. And this one, because I use the 4.5 inch line, trims to 4.5. So sometimes we do different sizes, and sometimes we just do a single fabric, but they are half square triangles on this end of the ruler. 2.5 inch, 3 inch, 3.5, 4.5, 5 inch. So they're all built into the ruler here. So that's your half square triangle cutting. If we're doing cutaways, we don't usually need to do doubles, but I'll show you that later. So that's your half square triangle basics. So with the cutaway, this was a square. We cut some pieces away and then we added half square triangles. So the first thing you're going to do is cut out your half square triangles just like you did before, but we're doing them with whatever size we need for that particular cutaway. If we're doing a small cutaway, for example, we need a 2.5 inch strip. So cut your 2.5 inch strip, and then you're going to be using your half square triangle ruler again, and you're putting it on the bottom of your strip with the dotted line, blunt on the top. I've already trimmed this edge just like I did last time, so do this. And you got two ways to blunt the end. Lift this up and cut it off like I did last time, or if you prefer, you can then flip the ruler over, turn it, and cut it across here. Makes no difference, just whatever you find the easiest, but that's two different ways to blunt the end. So you're going to go down your strip and cut as many half square triangles as your pattern asks for. So those are your half square triangles that you've cut. Now your square. You start with a square and you're going to do a cutaway. And there's different size cutaways, and these are on your ruler. This is a small, this is a large, and this is a medium. This time we're cutting away a small. Same process for all of them. Put your cutaway on the bottom edge of your square that you need to cut it away, and cut that section off. You're going to then, if it says, turn it, and then cut another piece away. Maybe it's even going to ask you to do one on all four corners. Whatever you do, this is your cutaway piece that you can't use, and we're going to then add your half square triangle piece onto here to make it perfect. This gets flipped here, blunt and blunt to your square, sew straight across, press the way you're told to, and that gives you your cutaway. And if you've got two cutaways, do one side and press it, and then you will do your second side and press it so it makes a nice neat edge. This will then trim back to the same size square that you cut in the first place. This happened to be a 4.5. So those are cutaways with half square triangles added to them. So this is a tall triangle, and this is slightly different because it's composed of a tall triangle here and two side tall triangles. These are kind of like mitts. One goes one way, one goes the other way. They can't both go the same way, as it doesn't make a square again. And I haven't trimmed it yet. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. First thing we're going to do is cut our tall triangle, and we're using this part of the ruler here. So you cut out your 4.5 inch strip, which is what it says on here, blunt to the top, dot to the bottom, and you are just cutting across like this. Some people, left-handed people also, prefer to do it side to side. So if you're left-handed, it's easier to cut it this way. But you're just cutting out those tall triangles, and that's finished. The trick to the side triangles, remember how I told you to put two rulers over here to square this up? So you get your two rulers, move one ruler, trim up the piece. This is folded in half. This is extremely important. If you don't have them together, wrong sides together, I like to stick to the same thing always, wrong sides together, you won't have two halves, one going in one direction and one going in the other direction. If you have them all right sides up, it doesn't work. So make sure that you have them stacked wrong sides together. And we're going to cut a base piece to make these out of. And what we need is 3 1/8. Now, that's a funny kind of measurement, but that is the way it is. So find your measurement on your ruler, and you want it to be 3 1/8 inches. Some people do 3 1/16. That doesn't give me enough fudge factor. I need fudge factor. So we're cutting away a section that we're going to play with our tall triangles. And with this tall triangle, there's a dot line here that says half tall triangle. And you're going to put it on the side, dotted line here. Now, if you're new to this and it makes you a little nervous, because what's left over is the other portion and you're worried it's going to be too big or too small, you could take a friction pen, just draw down the side, just till you get used to it, flip your ruler over and see how does that work out. And that works out great. So here's my dot, here's my cut line that I drew with my friction, so you know you're safe. Once you get used to this, it'll be okay. You just got to make sure that your dotted line is on the fabric. You don't want it off the fabric, it's got to be just slightly on the fabric, and the dotted line on the bottom, blunt on the top. You're going to cut straight across that diagonal, and then there's this lovely little notch up the top, this little nubbin piece, and it doesn't seem like very much, but if you cut that off, it will make it line up perfectly. So you also need to flip this one and cut that off on this one also. So you're just putting that together and cutting off that tiny little edge. It's not very much. When you go to sew, that's enough for 2 tall triangles. One piece will go on this side and the other piece will go on this side. And you're going to sew them one by one. But this is the magic. Once your diagonal is on here nicely and that little nubbin is down here, it leaves an exact quarter equilateral triangle right here. So put flat to here, diagonal to here, sew right up, press it, and then you're going to be putting the other side on. So same thing, line up and put it here. What's neat about when you line up the second one, those 2 little triangles should match on the top also. So these are matched. This leaves you a little triangle here. This blunt is matched. This is matched. So, and that is what you have. Now let me show you about trimming up. This is going to be trimmed to 4 1/2, and we've allowed ourselves a smidge of a fudge factor. The center point here is going to be at 2 1/4 because half of 4 1/2 is 2 1/4. So if I put my 2 1/4 inch line right on that point, my 4 1/2 inch line right on the bottom, I'm making sure I have 1/4 inch of fabric, of background fabric on my side triangles above that point. So here's my point, 2 1/4. 1/4 inch above I have 4 1/2 here. I'm trimming off a smidge over here and a smidge over here and a tiny bit when I turn it over here. Hardly anything, but it's just enough to make it absolutely perfect. And that's how you make a tall triangle. And those are all the components for making all of the different goddess tulle blocks. So this has been Ingrid from Quilt Essential Co. in St. Albert, and we've been talking about the goddess tulle and the tip sheet. If you're in my block of the month, you will have received a tip sheet, so follow along every month. If you're not in block of the month, but you would like to have the tip sheet, go to our website, and for a small fee, you can download that PDF and print it up in color. And hopefully that will be very helpful to you. So if you found this video useful, please leave us a like and click subscribe for future content. And thanks for sewing with me today, and I will see you soon for all of the other tips and tricks.